All righty, welcome to Wholesaling Mistakes. I am John Peterson. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump into this pretty quick. Now, as you kind of join either on Facebook or on YouTube, if you want to just check in with us, let us know you're out there. We do appreciate that. It is sometimes hard to talk into a planted fern behind me and no reactions from folks. So if you're coming on board and you want to say hello, name, where you're from, that is great and helpful. Tonight, we are talking about wholesaling, kind of attacking it from maybe a little bit different angle. Thanks, Mark, for joining us. We are, as I said, attacking from a little different angle. We're going to be talking about some mistakes that we see in our business. And then we've also asked Michael Gross, who many of you know is an attorney that has attended Wholesaling Mistakes for many years, is going to come on board. We have kind of a 15-minute or so recorded interview that I did with him earlier. And then Michael's going to come on live with us, and you can ask him any questions that you might about wholesaling, or for that matter, anything that's on your mind. Think about it. You have an expensive, educated, well-versed attorney open to taking your questions free of charge. What can get better than that? So as you listen to the video and as you come up with different questions, you can type them in, and Michael will answer those as we go through the video. And then certainly, as I said, he'll be live with us on air here, so you can ask him that too, and he can answer those for you. So before we get on kind of some of the mistakes, I do want to just run through wholesaling a little bit with you. I get asked all the time, how do you come up with topics for Wholesaling Mistakes every month? I mean, we've been doing this for 19 years. And what I really do is I just listen. I just listen to what people are calling me, what people are emailing me, what I'm seeing out in the market, different seminars I see that come online or through town when we could actually meet in person. And I take those subjects and I think about my own experiences with it, and I think about my network's experience with it. And then I try to take those subjects and relay them to you. And something that I think all of us have seen in wholesaling is it's just the explosion of it, to tell you the truth. I mean, people are interested in wholesaling more than ever. And I get it. I mean, a lot of people do not want to renovate a house, even though there's many people that want to do that. But it's something very exciting and exhilarating, if you will, to think about, hey, I can control a house today. I can go out and find a house and control it with a contract. And then by next week, have a nice fee in my hand, whether that's $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. That's very, very attractive. So I get it. And then you're seeing even more people wanting to take that to the next level, and they want to be full-time wholesalers. Forget about getting involved in the business as a way to get in, as a step. Like a lot of us, when I got started many years ago, we started into the business wholesaling, and then we morphed into renovation. Now, again, we've never forgotten about wholesaling, and we still do that. When the deal is right, we wholesale it out. But we are not a professional, or I am not a professional wholesaler. So there's been companies that have said, hey, forget about renovating. I'm just going to spend my time identifying deals and wholesaling those out. And they've taken that to the next level, because not only are they doing it here locally or in their home market, wherever that may be, they're also taking it on the road, if you will. They are setting up systems, setting up a business, and wholesaling properties all across the country. And what could be more exciting than that? So I just want to run through that with you real quick before we get to Michael. If you're just brand new to the real estate business, obviously wholesaling is controlling a contract. Excuse me, this is the live YouTube, so I got to grab this phone call. And I'm actually going to answer this phone call because Stephanie Walker's on the line, and she's interrupting my monthly Wholesaling Mistakes meeting. So I'm going to ask her on the phone, why aren't you online listening to our Wholesaling Mistakes meeting, Stephanie? Her exact words were, oops, I forgot. I am sorry. Thank you, Stephanie. All right, back to the show. So let me give you, so wholesaling is controlling a contract and then selling it. And there's also something called hybrid wholesaling, where you actually settle on the property. You literally do nothing. You don't even barely clean the house out, but then you broadcast to the open market and you can make very good money there. Let me run through a few things, and then I want to get the recording with Michael on the air here. Let me run through these with you again. If you ever have any questions or you need more information, we'll put up on my screen how to reach me, and be more than happy to do that with you. The first step is, identify a market. If that's your local market, great. If you want to expand this and you want to go bigger, add different markets by number one, add markets maybe that are surrounding your primary market. So if DC is your primary market, maybe you venture out to Baltimore County, maybe you go up to Washington County, maybe you go out to, maybe counties in Virginia, you go down to Richmond, and you start expanding your areas. I always tell people when they want to do this virtually, when you want to add cities, try to go somewhere where you have some knowledge or some contact. I was talking to Jim Howell earlier today, and he's buying a rental in Pittsburgh. Well, Jim went to school there in Pittsburgh. He spent 4 years and then a year after school. He knows Pittsburgh a little bit. It's a natural extended market for him. Maybe a hometown. Maybe you're from Michigan or you're from Ohio or Georgia or wherever, and maybe expanding your market and your wholesaling business to those markets might make some sense. Or you have relatives, right? In my case, I have relatives down in South Carolina. I went to school down in South Carolina. I own rental property in South Carolina. It makes natural sense for me to go down there and wholesale real estate. My son goes to school in the Midwest. I've done projects in Ohio. And so again, you can naturally extend your market if you want to wholesale in other markets by towns that you know. I'm going to run through a few other ideas too. Next step is research. Research your desired location, get to know the neighborhoods, get to know the area amenities, understand employment, how that's growing, understand housing values and rental rates. All these things you can research right here from your desk on your computer, and you can implement that into your wholesale business. Know your numbers, understand the value of properties in those markets. Understand what a renovator, is looking for, or a landlord's looking for in that particular market. It might be different in Pittsburgh than it is in Arlington, Virginia. So get to know those numbers in those areas. And then figure out how much a wholesale fee is in that area. Listen, finding a property and flipping it in rural North Carolina is going to be different than doing one here in Washington, D.C. That fee there might be $3, $4, $5 grand. And if you can do 2 or 3 of those a month, hey, you're making a good living. Here in Washington, you might secure a property and wholesale it for 10, 15, 20, maybe $30,000. You do 3 of those, now you're netting yourself quite a big number every single year. So the wholesale fee is going to be really contingent on the value of the properties in the market that you're looking for. Create a system. Let me run through this. How are you going to market for deals, right? Number one question. How are you going to find your deals? Got to come up with something. What's your monthly marketing budget? Can you spend money in that market to attract deals? What's your average wholesale fee? We just talked about that. So understanding these numbers will help you determine what markets you can go into and how much money you can spend on marketing, or how many foot soldiers, if you will, find in those areas to help bring deals to you in order for you to wholesale them. Are you willing to renovate? In other words, if you find a good property and you can't wholesale it, are you willing to renovate? So all these things you're going to start understanding and creating to support your wholesaling business locally and then also around the country. I'm going to run through a few more things here. You got to create a support network or team. Got to have a good title attorney. Michael Gross is going to talk about that. A couple good real estate agents to help you figure out values and figure out neighborhoods. A couple contractors that might be able to run by the house. Say you have a house in Dayton, Ohio. You have a good contractor that can run by. You can take a look at it, give you an idea of what kind of works needed to be done. Again, that's important when you're wholesaling too. Maybe a runner. I call them a runner. They can just run, take some pictures of the house, can get you just a local flavor of the neighborhood, maybe hang out on the street, drive the street a little bit on a Friday or Saturday night, figure out crime rates. I mean, you want somebody in that town to run errands for you and to help you determine if that deal is a good deal. Then finally, you have to create buyers, right? You got to create buyers in not only your local market, but these expanded markets. Those buyers can be renovators. Those buyers could be landlords. A landlord will pay you more money for your wholesale deal than a renovator. Folks, it's very easy. You can pull up on the computer with certain databases all the people that own rental houses in the neighborhood that you have under contract. Reach out to them. Tell them, hey, I have another house in your neighborhood that I'm selling for X. Are you interested in another rental in that neighborhood? They most likely will pay a little bit more than a renovator. And maybe an end user, right? I talked about a hybrid model. Maybe you can actually settle on a house. I know that's the next step. And then just let that house go to an end user. Folks, there are handymen out there. There are people that will buy houses literally for $80,000 that are worth $100,000 that need $30,000 worth of work. They think they got a great deal because they want to live in that house for long term and they're willing to renovate that house to their liking. That is how I hybrid a lot of wholesale real estate deals that make sense here locally. Finally, create your marketing plan. Folks, get your online advertising going, get your social media up. So when you get a property in Dayton, Ohio, or Greensboro, North Carolina, or Hagerstown, Maryland, man, you're flipping that on the social media. You're pushing that out to that market and those folks that might be potentially interested in those properties as a renovation or as a long-term rental. And finally, before I bring Michael on here, is I want you to create a source of capital for purchases and deposits. Michael's going to talk a little bit about earnest money deposits. You need a little bit of money here, folks. Get a credit card, credit line. Maybe have a partner to put up those deals. I know of one partner, you're looking right at him on the screen. So let us know if we can help you too. But earnest money, you need a little bit of money. And maybe, just maybe, some of those houses, I've never understood why wholesalers don't do this. Some do, a lot don't. If you come across a deal that you cannot wholesale, but it makes a good, you just haven't had enough time, it hasn't been exposed to the market enough, learn how to settle on that property, maybe clean it out, maybe do some very minor fixes, and then put that house on the market, expose it to the broad market, and watch that thing sell to an end user, a handyman that can make you quite a bit of money on that transaction. So again, I hope some of that helps you understand wholesaling. I know I ran through that quickly. I am here certainly to help you with any of these aspects. If any of you want to build a wholesale pipeline or build a virtual wholesale business in different markets, boy, I would love to sit down and work with you and figure that city out, figure out some of these systems. You'll be amazed at the technology out there. You'll be amazed at things you can do right from your own desk. And clearly here at REIA, we don't have a whole lot of time to go through every aspect. And again, tonight we wanted to really focus on, believe it or not, a lot of mistakes folks make and disasters to avoid and how you can set yourself up well in order to be successful in the wholesale business. So with that, what I'm going to do now is we're kind of doing a hybrid, that kind of an in-word now, a hybrid model of Washington REIA tonight, like hybrid school. We did a little live action for you. I know you've all taken some notes, and if you need some more help with those notes, just text me, email me, let me know. I'll be happy to send them off to you. But a hybrid model now is going to take about a 15-minute interview I did with Michael this afternoon on some of the mistakes that he's seen in his practice. And then we're going to come back live again. Michael's going to be with us and get your questions ready. Again, I'm sure he will not mind if they're also on some few other different subjects. So sit back, grab that glass of water, cup of coffee, listen to Michael and I's interview, get your questions ready, and we'll be back live with you here in about 15 minutes. Take it away, video. All right. Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sure.
Okay. So that's the beauty of being flexible in the real estate investment business. I'm getting a number of texts here. No sound, can't hear it. Nobody is saying anything. So we're going to do this live, Michael. We're going to redo our little interview. All right.
All right.
So I asked Michael Gross to come on and share with us in his practice some of the things that he has seen that wholesalers kind of make a mistake from. So what I'm going to do is we're going to walk through a few of these. Michael, feel free in a minute here to give the audience a little bit about your background. And then let's grab one of these. Let's start out with mishandling the EMD, what we kind of talked about. So take it away, Michael.
Well, in terms of my background, I've been doing real estate law work for 40 years, which you could probably tell by the fact that I have no hair and or what I do have is white. Most of my time has been spent representing investors, such as members of the REIA, on all aspects of buying property. You might say the standard way, sort of find a house, get a bank loan, go to closing. Also alternative financing, creative financing, owner takebacks, that sort of thing. And just generally doing my best to keep my investor clients out of trouble and profitable, I suppose.
Okay. Well, we all need that. And as I said, I asked Michael this past week to come up with 3 or 4 of the most common things that he said. And one of them that jumped out at me when he sent me some of his list was he wrote in bold, mishandling the earnest money deposit. And again, I think people, especially if you're just starting out, should understand some of this. So Michael, you want to just talk about this case that you mentioned that you recently had come across your desk?
Yeah, this was an unfortunate situation. When you're doing wholesaling, you have to understand that there's 2 entirely separate contracts. One, we'll call it the AB contract, which is between the owner, Mr. A, and you, Mr. B. And then a second contract, the assignment contract between you and the ultimate buyer, C. And if the AB contract calls for an earnest money deposit, and the BC contract calls for an initial payment, we'll say, towards the assignment fee, those are not the same thing. Each contract has its own payment, and you can't use one to be the other. You can't have the initial payment under the assignment agreement substitute for the earnest money deposit. There are 2 reasons for this. The first one is that if you sell somebody a contract that says there's an EMD that's already been placed, they're going to expect to see a credit line on the settlement sheet for that EMD that you put down.
Right.
And if it's not there, they're going to wonder. If you don't provide for it, what's going to happen is it will have to come out of your EMD. So instead of getting what you think is $10,000 for the assignment, if there's supposed to be $1,000 EMD, you're only going to wind up with $9,000. Secondly, if you confuse the 2 and the contract doesn't settle, as happened in one of my cases, then the question is, who's entitled to that money? Because if you tried to substitute your initial payment for the earnest money deposit and your buyer doesn't settle, your seller could say, wait a minute, that's the EMD I wanted.
Right.
As opposed to you saying you failed to settle on your contract, I want it. So you have to be careful in the assignment agreement to talk about what money is being put down for what reason.
Right. And so if you're specific in that contract where me as the owner of the contract says, Mr. Wholesaler, I want $10,000 to be put in escrow to make sure that you're going to perform in this contract. And if you don't perform, I'm going to take your $10,000. As long as you spell out what that $10,000 is for, and you put up your EMD, you should be fine. Or if I tell the original seller, hey, I'm going to put up, myself or the third party will put up $1,000 earnest money deposit, right? You're okay.
As long, see, the whole point in doing contracts is clarity. You
Right.
never sign a contract in order to keep somebody honest, because it's not going to happen. There's
Yeah.
no piece of paper in the world that's going to make a dishonest person honest. The reason you write a contract is to create clarity so everyone understands what's going on. You can have Mr. C, the ultimate purchaser, put down the earnest money deposit,
Right.
but you need to say, you'll pay X dollars towards an initial payment on the assignment agreement and Y dollars as the earnest money deposit.
Right.
But you
Right.
have to be clear about it. The other reason is if you're not clear about it, you wind up shorting yourself the amount of the EMD that you should have put down.
That's great. I mean, REIA is free, but that was worth the price of admission, literally. That little tip. Let's talk about too. I thought this was fascinating too, because I run into this too on the side of when I buy it from a wholesaler. Is you wrote down adding terms to the sale in the assignment that are not necessarily in the contract. And I know you had a recent case where that was screaming at everybody. Why don't you tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you're selling a contract, all you can sell is the contract that already exists.
Right.
I think the example I used with you, John, was that if you're assigning a contract for a can of plain peas at Giant, you can't in the assignment say that they're buttered peas, because they're not. All Giant's giving you are the plain peas.
Right.
Well, in this particular case, in the assignment agreement, the Mr. B, the assignor, had promised C that the property would be vacant at closing. The underlying contract between A and B said nothing about it, and the seller decided, although he considered having the tenant leave, the tenant decided to stay, and the seller said yes. The buyer gets to closing, and the property's not vacant. And the seller says, what do you mean it doesn't have to be vacant?
Gotcha.
Now, everybody wound up pointing fingers at the Mr. B, at the assignor, who stuck this into the contract. And you can't do that. All you can do when you're doing an assignment is to say, I've got this can of peas, and I'm letting you buy it in whatever form it's in. You can't change anything in the assignment.
So you have to be very specific too, obviously, about like transfer taxes, who's paying those, like you said, whether the house is vacant or not, whether the owner might want a holdover. So again, it kind of leads to something that I know a lot of new folks that get in the wholesale business are always nervous about, and that's not showing the assignor, the person buying it, myself. I have a hard time in some cases getting the original contract from in this case, B, the person that put the house under contract. I think it's because they're nervous for me to see how much they're making. But in reality, what I really want to see is I want to make sure that what I'm buying is what I think I'm buying. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, for my money, for my clients' money, because I tell them this as well, I would never buy a contract that I haven't seen.
Right.
Because you don't know what the true underlying terms are. You don't know who's paying the transfer taxes.
Right.
You don't know whether it's going to be vacant. You don't know practically anything about the property other than the address and your net number. And that's not really enough to buy the property. You don't know if there are any rights to inspect the property. You don't know any of that. So you shouldn't, and for my advice, buy any contract until you've seen it, you've read it.
Sure.
You're right. The assignors are sometimes worried that you'll go around behind them and cut another deal with the seller, and so they don't want to show you the contract. But once they've given you the address, in these days of the internet, you could go and find the seller and cut your own contract anyway. So.
Right.
I mean, you can't. It's not appropriate, and
right.
If you tried to, you'd have problems. But that's not a reason for not showing somebody the contract.
So
and you shouldn't feel insecure about the assignment fee that you're making, because if the number works for Mr. C, for the ultimate buyer, it really doesn't matter who gets how much. When you buy a car at the dealer, I was just thinking about this today, you don't care how much the salesman gets and how much the owner gets and how much goes to the Mid-Atlantic Auto Marketing Board. That's not your concern. Your concern is the bottom line number you're paying.
Right.
And so there's no reason not to see the contract.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I know when I buy from wholesalers, I'm looking at, can I still do what I want to do with that property? Can I still go in and renovate it and resell it and make a fair profit? Or can I go in and renovate it if I need to and rent it? Do the numbers work? Now, I'll be totally honest. And I think if renovators and or buyers are totally honest, we don't like to see somebody making $40,000, $50,000. But even though I paid that, I always remind myself, listen, and I've also made that. So I've been on both sides. Does it work for me? Is it a good deal for me? And you're exactly right. And your point about, and we talked earlier in the video, your point about not being embarrassed, not being insecure, you're providing a service. That leads to the question, though, I know a lot of folks have from the more prolific wholesalers is, in your experience, the seller doesn't really care that person is making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 above the contract. Is that been your experience?
Generally, the seller doesn't care because more often than not, the seller doesn't really inquire. They're not looking at the buyer's side of the settlement sheet. They're looking at their own.
Right.
And most people know what they want to get out of a house, so that if they get it, they're happy. I mean, they know you came to them to make a profit.
Right.
As I think I said to you before, your business card doesn't say the United Way. They know you're in this to make a living.
Right.
So they would be foolish to think that the last dollar in the deal is going to them. And most people, in my experience, don't ask.
Right. And in most of these cases, we're buying properties that have one of two things going on. Either they need a fair amount of renovation work, number one, or the folks want to sell for myriad of reasons, and they're looking at their bottom line. Can they, like you said, can they walk away with that check or that wire in their bank? And as long as they receive that, they're usually okay. The other thing that we talked about, again, folks, as you're listening to this, or as we are going to be live here, if you have any questions for Michael, you can write them down, and we'll kind of walk through some of those as we finish up here with Michael, and he'll stick around to answer those. Overvaluing the assignment. I'm sure you have investors that are all jacked up and excited. They have what they consider a great deal, and they just ask for too much, or do the numbers just don't work? Or a combination of both?
But really, it's the same thing. If the numbers don't work for the ultimate investor,
right, it
doesn't matter why, whether the property is overpriced or the assignment fee is too high. If you get a reputation for putting together good contracts that people can make a living on, you'll stay in business for much longer. I can't remember who it was. There was a financier on Wall Street back in the 20s or the 30s, and they asked him what the secret of success was. And he said that he bought stock and then he sold it again while it was still on the way up, because he said he figured he'd leave room for the next guy to make some money. He wasn't going to chase the absolute top dollar, because he knew that he could always sell it if he left room for the next guy to make a living.
Right.
And it's a good way to look at it. Not to mention the fact that it's just massively easier to hit 4 singles than it is to hit 1 home run. So in the time you spend trying to chase the huge number, you could make 5 or 6 other deals that might net you more overall.
Right. And what I've told people too over time is that, as you said, is you get a reputation. So all of a sudden, if a wholesaler calls me, and I know we ran through some things at the beginning, but if I know they understand renovation, they understand the values, They're good at putting the contract together. Man, as soon as that call comes in, I'm rushing to my phone or wanting to get the address and want to do a deal with that person, versus a person where I know they always overvalue the property. They state the renovation is 40 and it's 100. And after 4 or 5 times of running through that scenario, when they email me or text me or call me, I'm not quite as excited. I know that there's probably, maybe there's a deal. Most likely there's not. So as you said, as you build up this reputation, it's going to get easier, and you're going to have more buyers for your properties on the very end. That's really helpful. Again, if you have some questions for Michael, go ahead and type them in. They can be about anything that he talked about here on wholesaling, or really, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer anything else that you might be wondering about in the real estate business. As I said, he's got a long career of helping investors. Justin, if you're in the back room there was a question that came through. For whatever reason, it's not coming up on our feed here. Here we go, from Marvin. Marvin asks, what about non-circumvent clause in assignment contract to help with willingness to share contract? So what about a non-circumvent clause in assignment contract to help with willingness to share contract? Thoughts on that?
Well, it couldn't hurt. I mean, if you're going to put in the assignment agreement, understand I'm not going to show you the contract unless you promise you're going to be an honest guy, right, and not try to cut me out of the deal. It certainly can't hurt.
Sure. But as you said, I mean, you can put anything you want in writing, but you can't turn a dishonest person into an honest person. And even if you have a circumvent clause in there, they'll find another way to get around it. And again, Marvin, that's part of building your business, right? Building your reputation, and also working with a pool of buyers that will not do that, where they won't. I mean, one of the things that I don't quite understand with some of the prolific wholesalers is why they have a need to, I get it in one sense, they want to blast it out to 1,000 people in their database. But again, if you're always and some of the good ones, some of the guys that are doing this in multiple markets and making a lot of money, have a great system. But to me, if you have a certain amount of good buyers, why reinvent the wheel every single time? I mean, if I have a renovator in Dayton, Ohio, and I know he can handle 5 to 8 deals a year, he's going to get preference over blasting this out to hundreds of people I have no clue who they are, for the very reason, Marvin, that you asked. I don't know if those people might go behind my back or might do something, versus a person I've dealt with that it went smooth, the deposit came in, they closed on time, and we were off and running. So again, setting up your business correctly and thinking through some of those things will help. Jim, thank you. When should you put contingencies or not put contingencies in your contract? So Jim, I know you're listening. Specifically, I'm guessing just like an inspection clause or things of that nature. Michael, thoughts on that? It's a little vague there.
You put a contingency in a contract when you need one.
Yeah.
And you don't put one in if you don't. So, for example, if you're planning on showing the property to 3 or 4 different investors, you'd better have something in the contract that says that you have the right to come in and inspect the property, sure, your colleagues, etc. Or the seller could say, sorry, I just cleaned the carpet. Nobody's coming in the house. And they'd have every right to do so.
Right.
You don't want to lard it up with too many contingencies. But if something is important enough, and this applies to wholesaling or any other contract, sure, if you're buying a car, whatever, if there's something that's important enough to be part of your decision-making process about the deal, you have to put it in the contract. Not because you're trying to keep the other guy honest, but just so that everybody has a clear understanding. And frankly, you might forget.
Right.
Again, it's a minor situation, but there was a case where everybody agreed, yeah, during the walkthrough, the neighborhood boys just hit the baseball through the basement window. Don't worry, says the seller. I'll fix it before closing. If it's important enough to the buyer, put it in the contract. Why? The seller may forget in all good faith. You may forget.
Right.
Or the seller, as this happened actually in one case that I had, the seller might die. And then the seller's personal representative was selling the property. They're not going to go out and fix something just because the seller said that it was going to happen.
Right.
Because they have a duty to pull in assets of the estate, not expend them.
I think what people too are worried about, especially newer wholesalers, is they know the market is competitive, and they're worried that if they put in too many contingencies, the seller will go with something that's cleaner. And that may be true. The other thing wholesalers do as you grow your business and so forth, if you negotiate a contract and put a relatively low earnest money deposit, $100 or $200, some of the wholesalers just factor that in as cost of business. If they can't perform, and that's their only damages, the earnest money is the only damages that the seller can go after, they might try their darndest to wholesale that contract. And if they can't, they walk away from the couple $100 or the $1,000 earnest money deposit. So I understand Jim's question, but in some cases, the less contingencies that you can put in, probably the better chance in some cases you have. But Michael's point is important. Don't do anything that you're not comfortable with, and the important things put in the contract. Alan, how can I fix the problem if I invest in a property and determine that a neighbor several owners back built a fence that is actually on the investment property side of the line? So, Michael, how do you fix that one?
Well, the short answer is tear the fence down. But
and hire
you're talking about whether or not it creates claims and what have you. That's really terribly fact driven, because first of all, if the landowner allowed the guy to build the fence there, it gave him permission, the encroaching fence owner acquires no rights at all.
Right.
Because I can permit anybody to use my land, and that doesn't give them rights in the land. If the encroaching fence owner built the fence where he thought his property line was, and he's trying to claim rights as a result of that, number one, it takes 20 years for the concept of being able to hold title by adverse possession applies.
Right. And
you also have to, without getting too technical, you have to meet several other requirements. If you find you've got an offline fence, which raises the interesting question of whether you want to, when you buy property, do you want to order a survey up front?
Right.
A lot of people say you don't need to in subdivisions where everybody knows where the fence, the property lines are. Sometimes you don't. And if it's important to you that the property does go all the way back to that large tree back there, you may want to order a survey up front.
Right.
But the particular problem is going to be very fact-driven for the answer.
Let's hop back wholesaling. Let me throw out a scenario to you. In your practice, you have I know it varies, but you have 10 investors that come to you with a wholesale contract. How many of those 10 contracts do you think eventually go to closing? Out of 10.
Well, it depends on the quality of the wholesalers. I'm pretty lucky, actually, because I've been working with people and they've learned the lessons, I suppose.
Sure.
So most of their contracts come through.
Okay.
If you don't oversell it, if you write a good contract, and if you get a reputation for good contracts, then you're going to be able to perform. Right.
Okay. Fair enough. That's good. Other questions for Michael? Here we go. Samuel, what is the best local bank in DC that is investor friendly for future business line of credit? Michael, if you know one, you can throw one out. I'll give them one I work with too.
I don't know about the best.
Yeah.
But people talk about Monarch, they talk about Eagle, they talk about National Capital. Sandy Spring was hot for a while.
Yeah. 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 What I would do, what the place I would start is where you bank, wherever you bank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There. Believe it or not, I bank. My business checking account is with Wells Fargo. It was Wachovia. Many of you know that many years ago I won a car through Wachovia, just a random drawing many years ago. That's why I've stayed with them, to be honest, because they gave me a car. But they're a huge bank, right? And they don't offer some of the things that, as Michael said, some of these other banks offer. But one thing they do offer, a lot of big banks do, they do have these signature credit lines that if your credit is okay, it's not have to be perfect, but it's okay, you can literally get a $25,000 start with up to $250,000 line of credit. And it's all credit based. It's all credit based. So I would check with your bank, your credit union that you bank with first, and then venture out maybe to some of these banks, create a relationship with them, ask them about exactly what you want to establish. It might take a minute to do that. But they're out there. They're just basically what they are signature loans. If you want a line of credit and you don't want to secure it against a rental property or your own personal home, things of that nature. But those are out there more than people think. Now, the downside of those is they have the ability to adjust them in good times and bad. A lot of us got stuck in 2008 where we had $200,000 line of credit, and all of a sudden we got a letter that stated, by the way, that $200,000 line now is only $75,000. Because we're worried about the economy and what you might do with that $200,000 and not pay us back. So they can adjust those in the fine print. Other questions for Michael as we kind of ease out of this meeting. I hope some of this information was helpful. And really, some of the bottom line here is when I started out talking about building your team, building your network of people. Having a good attorney on your team, folks, is vital. I mean, spending a few dollars with someone like Michael before you even venture out to put a few things in place is probably a wise investment. I mean, if you make some of these mistakes, it could cost you a wholesale fee of $10,000 or worse. You could get kind of in trouble. So again, surrounding yourself with good people, surrounding yourself with people that work with investors, surrounding yourself with people that understand some of these creative terms and some of these assignment contracts and different things will be well worth it. Michael's number and email are on there. I know some of you have it. I'm sure he's available to talk to you like any good professional. He doesn't want, you to waste his time. So he gets paid for giving out legal advice. But it's well worth it as you get into this and as your business grows. Understand that some of these things get outdated. Some of these things need to be revised. Some of these laws change. And having someone on your phone that is experienced will be well worth it. Some parting words or shots for people that are out there venturing around the wholesale world. Any last advice here as we maybe take a question or two more?
Well, what you said actually just now about creating a team is really very important because human brains, human skills are the cheapest part of the business. I spent many years in college and then in law school doing stage lighting and rock concert lighting, but I'm not about to, rewire my house.
Right.
I'm definitely going to hire an electrician to do that. I'm going to buy his brains.
Right.
And it should work the same way with the professionals that are involved there, whether it's me, whether it's a plumber to look at a problem you think you might have in a house, whatever. Buying brains is the best thing you can do. Right.
And I encourage folks out there as they're expanding to look at these markets. Jim, in a market where uncertainty is so great, COVID, and property values are rising so rapidly, what is the most efficient and accurate way to get a reliable after repair value? So thoughts on that? I'm happy to answer that too.
Yeah, you'll have to answer that one because I'm not competent to deal with property value.
Yeah, again, this goes back to team too, Jim. I mean, if you find a good local realtor in a market that you're researching, they will understand the market. They will understand values. And the best way, in my opinion, still is to get a realtor to pull the local listings and to look at, in a rising market, look at the last 2 to 3 months, see the trends. Don't factor the trend's continuing, take that last sale or last few sales, maybe average them out, look at them closely, and you can get a very good idea of what things are selling for. If you don't have access to Realtor, there's a lot of online tools. A lot of us know the Redfins, the Trulias, the Zillows. We get a basic idea. It compares other houses in that general area to what things are worth. Then you can look at square footage. You can look at basement, no basement. You can look at updates through pictures, and you can get a pretty good idea of what that house should sell. Yes, great info. Is Mr. Gross able to assist Virginia investors? That's a great question.
I'm not admitted to practice in Virginia, but I could give you the name of a colleague who could help you.
There you go. There you go. And feel free to do that. Russell, do you advise bringing an attorney to closing to represent your interest in a wholesale deal? That's interesting.
Well, depending on where you are in the deal, if you're the wholesaler, you shouldn't need somebody sitting in, because you should already have told the settlement company how much you're supposed to be getting. You should probably have seen a copy of the settlement sheet to make sure you're there.
Right.
And your situation is sort of limited. Now, if you're the buyer, the person doing the closing should be a settlement company you've chosen. And with any luck, even if the company itself is a neutral party, like, you know, I happen to be Maryland and DC counsel to a settlement company, and if somebody comes to it through me, we're obviously going to take a look at it from their point of view.
Right.
The time, though, to have an attorney look at your documents is not at closing necessarily. The time to have them do that is before you sign them.
Right.
The thing about signing documents is once you've done it, you've set your feet in the concrete and let it harden.
Right.
So this actually goes back to something we talked about before, clarity in your documents. If you don't understand what you're signing, take time to go to somebody who does. And there is nothing wrong, and I've seen this done very often in residential contracts, where the parties will sign it and the buyer will say that it's contingent for 48 hours for them to go run it by their attorney or their banker or their father or whatever. That happens too. So you can sort of make a deal halfway, and still have the chance for somebody to look at it. But once you've signed the document, your feet are in the concrete.
Right. As Russell pointed out, a lot of settlement attorneys, they should be technically neutral. A lot of you know in the real world, as wholesalers, a lot of wholesalers tend to direct you as part of the contract to their settlement attorneys, because again, their settlement attorneys are geared up. They have a format for doing these types of wholesale deals with the sellers and with the buyers. So again, in that case where you're not picking the settlement attorney and maybe you're new or maybe you're unsure, I think hiring someone to take a look at documents, like Michael said before, could make a lot of sense. And again, for those of you that are listening to this and will listen to this, and you're brand new to wholesale, this series tonight was not to intimidate you. This series was not to say, hey, don't go out and wholesale a piece of real estate because it's too complicated. This is all learned. This is not, in my opinion, rocket science. You can sit with an attorney. You can figure some of this out. It's a really exciting part of the business. Let me tell you, there was no better feeling when I wholesaled my first deal. I've told it many times. 17 grand, threw it in the bank, ran through the drive-through every other day to get that balance of $17,043 or whatever I had at the time. It's exciting, and what it does, and what we haven't talked about at WREIA in a while, is that belief system. Once you cash that first check, all of a sudden your whole perspective changes, and you're like, you know what, I can do this. And it doesn't matter if it's for 30 or 2,000. It's the belief, it's the validation of the work. And I think if you hang around people at WREIA, then people that have been doing this, and they are more than happy to assist folks trying to get started and get going because for a lot of us, it changed our perspective on real estate and how we can conduct our business. So I want to thank Michael. Like I said, he put his contact information out there. It's up there again. Feel free to email and contact him if you have questions, or more importantly, if you have a closing or a legal question or a legal issue that you want to discuss with him. It's well worth the time. It's well worth the time. And again, I hope some of this helped you out. If you have additional questions, a lot of you have my phone number, my email. Feel free to reach out. We're out. It's springtime, folks. I hope a lot of you have gotten vaccinated. I got vaccinated. If you don't believe in vaccination, that's okay too. We still love you. But things are happening. Things are opening. Nice weather this week. The real estate market's humming pretty good. Competition is great, but that doesn't mean we can't get out there and be part of that and enjoy the fruits of a real estate investment. So thanks for everyone that's joined us tonight. Michael, especially, thank you for you. Thank you chipping in and being a good sport about coming live. I think our video was not half of what our live presentation was. So we did good. Thank you all. Take care, and we will see you soon.
See you soon.